Hey there, everybody. Welcome to my channel, The Magical Solution. My name is Leilani, and this is How We Grow. So tonight we are continuing on with our book club, and we are moving forward to chapter, I believe, 14 from the book The Gospel According to Spiritism, written by Alan Kardec. Now, those of you who have not joined me for the first two books in the series, because this is the third book in the series, don't freak out. It's all good. First and foremost, the other two books that we've read together are on my YouTube channel. You can go back, catch up if you want to, or you can hang out anyway, because the information in the book, whether it's the first or the fifth, because he wrote like a whole series, is still very valuable, good information for you to have. And we can always clarify certain terminology and certain things that you may have missed from the previous book. That's not a problem. Leave your questions, like just drop them in as we go, and then I will address them towards the end of the live. That way I don't ruin the flow of the book. Hey, what's up, y'all? So let's talk a little bit really quick about what this is all about, okay? So the Magical Solutions Book Club is what we like to do once a week, usually on Monday nights, but the schedule's been kind of wild lately. I'll explain that later. Where we read a chapter for 1 hour. We just read as much as we can for an hour, and we answer questions, and we do as much as we can with whatever book we chose for the series. So we chose the Allan Kardec series, but I'm only reading up to book number 3. So once this book is done together, we will move on to a different author, okay? So the Gospel According to Spiritism, so far what we know about this book is that Allan Kardec basically takes the Bible, he takes passages from the Bible, and he interprets them through the eyes of Spiritism. And I can't say it's the spirits that interpret it through the eyes of Spiritism, right? Because as we recall from the first two books of Allan Kardec, it's not him doing the talking, he's actually interviewing spirits. And he's interviewing spirits through mediums. So there's a couple of mediums that he tends to frequent, and he will go there, with his notebook and his questions ready, and he asks the questions, and the mediums channel these spirits, and specifically the spirit of truth, and the information just starts flowing. And this is how we get the Spiritism of the, Victorian age. So I'm really excited to pick up where we left off. I know it's been a while. I want to say thank you all for being so patient. Thank you all for always being supportive. But let's get to it. I'm so done talking about me and talking about the little book. So let's get to it. So chapter 14, the title is Honor Your Mother and Your Father. The subcategories within this chapter are filial devotion, who is my mother and who are my brothers, corporal kinship and spirit kinship. So we're going to be talking a little bit about spirit families, soul families, all the fluffy stuff that the New Agers love to talk about. We're going to get into a little bit of that as well. The next category is children's ingratitude and family ties. So these are the subcategories within chapter 14. So let's get to it. Of course, my mouse decided to act like a fool. So first, we're going to quote the few little pieces of the Bible that he wants to address in this chapter. So the first quote is going to come from Mark, the second quote from Luke, the third quote from Matthew, and the last quote will be from Exodus. Here we go. You know the commandments. Do not commit adultery. Do not kill. Do not steal. Do not render false testimony. Do not speak ill of anyone. Honor your father and your mother. Now, honoring your father and your mother so that you may live long in the land which the Lord your God shall give you. So that's the quote. So let's break it down. Filial devotion, right? So the commandment, honor your father and your mother, is a consequence of the general law of charity and love for one's neighbor. For one cannot love one's neighbor without loving one's father and mother. However, the term honor includes an added duty in this regard, filial devotion. In this way, God wanted to show that to love, one must add respect, consideration, submission, acquiescence, which implies that all that charity requires being done regarding our neighbor should be done even more strictly regarding our parents. This duty naturally extends to the individuals who take the place of one's father and mother, and who have even more merit because their devotion is less obligatory. God always strictly punishes all violations of this commandment. I've said this before and I'll say it again before we move forward. This is simply a doctrine of a particular perspective within Spiritism. As we go on throughout Spiritism and we go on throughout the age to current times, we're going to see a lot of this information slowly transforming to fit our current situation. Why? Because Spiritism is a living, breathing religion that is willing to evolve, right? But because it was written at the time of very, very big Christian and Catholic influence, we're going to see a lot of that language within these books. So just be weary of that as I move forward, right? Let's get back to it. So honoring our father and mother does not only entail respecting them, it also means assisting them in their need, providing for their rest in old age, and surrounding them with the care they took of us in our childhood. True filial devotion is displayed especially when parents are lacking in resources. Do persons really fulfill this commandment if they think they have done a great thing for having given their parents only what is necessary for them not to die of hunger while they deprive themselves of nothing? Or if they relegate them to the worst rooms in the house so that they are not left out on the street while reserving for their own use what is best and most comfortable? Such parents can even consider themselves fortunate when this is not done out of ill will, and if they are not made to pay for it for the rest of their lives by being put in charge of the housework. Is this the time in our lives when old and weak parents are to be servants of their younger and stronger children? Did their mother make them pay for her milk when they were in the cradle? Did she count the times she watched over them when they were ill, or the steps she took to provide them what they needed? No. Children do not owe their poor parents only what is strictly necessary, but also all the little extras possible in token of their thoughtfulness and the loving care that represent not only interest on what they themselves have received from them, but the payment of a sacred debt as well. This is the only filial devotion accepted by God. Woe, therefore, to those who forget what they owe to the ones who supported them in their weakness, who, besides their physical life, gave them moral life also, and who often imposed harsh privations on themselves in order to ensure their well-being. Woe to such ingrates, for they themselves will be punished with ingratitude and abandonment. They will be struck in their dearest affections and sometimes in their current life, but certainly in another, when they themselves will bear what they made others bear. It is true that some parents do not recognize their duties and are not what they should be for their children. However, it is for God to punish them and not for their children. It is not the children's place to reproach their parents because they themselves perhaps deserve it to be this way. If charity establishes, as a law, repaying evil with good, being indulgent towards the imperfections of others and not speaking ill of one's neighbor, forgetting and forgiving wrongs, and even loving one's enemies, how much more do these obligations apply regarding our own parents? Hence, children must take as their rule of conduct toward their parents all Jesus's precepts concerning one's neighbor and tell themselves that every behavior that would be reprehensible towards strangers would be even more so towards their parents, and that what may be merely a wrong in former instances may become a crime in the latter, because to lack of charity one adds ingratitude. God said, "Honor your father and your mother so that you may live long in the land of the Lord your God shall give you." But why does he promise earthly life as a reward and not a heavenly life? Like the explanation in the words that God shall give you, which omitted from modern form of the Decalogue, denatures its meaning. In order to understand these words, one must recall the situation and ideas of the Hebrews at the time in which they were spoken. They did not yet understand the future life. Their view did not extend beyond the corporal one. Thus, they had to be more strongly impressed by which they could see than by which they could not. And that is why God spoke to them in a language appropriate to them, as if speaking to children. Did it not did it in a manner that could satisfy them? At the time, they were in the desert, and the land that God shall give them was the promised land, the goal of their aspirations. They wanted nothing more than that. And God told them that they would live a long time in it, meaning that they would possess it for a long time if they observed the divine commandments. Now, let me just kind of pause it here for just 1 second. Once again, be mindful of how Allan Kardec and the spirit of truth and the language of this time, be cognizant of how they describe cultures that they don't deem white Western cultures, right? So cultures in the East, cultures of the Hebrew people, cultures of the African people, cultures of the melanated people. You will notice in all of the books in the series, they are spoken about not quite highly, almost like savages, almost like they just didn't know any better, almost like, it's giving very much colonized language. So be mindful of that and try and read through that, because the information again is juicy information, right? We want to take out the parts that make sense and that work, right? um but yeah, so just be mindful of that. Let's get back to it. However, when Jesus came, their ideas were more developed. The time having arrived to give them a less material nourishment, Jesus initiates them into the spirit life by telling them, "My kingdom is not of this world. It is there and not on the earth, that you will receive recompense for your good deeds." So, with these words, the physical promised land became a heavenly homeland. And furthermore, when he calls them to observe the commandment, "Honor your father and mother," it is no longer the earth that he promises them, but heaven. So, we see a little bit of that transition in that time as well. So, who is my mother and who are my brothers? That is the next subcategory. And the quote we are going to use in the Bible is Mark and Matthew. He tends to combine these quotes. That's why it's not necessary to give all the numbers. Anyway, the quote is, "And having arrived at the house, they found such a large crowd of people gathered there that they could not even eat their meal. When his family learned of this, they came to take charge of him because they said that he had lost his mind. Therefore, when his mothers and brothers arrived, they remained outside and asked for him to be called. Now the people were seated around him, and someone said to him, your mother and brothers are outside calling for you." But he answered them, "Who is my mother and who are my brothers?" And looking at those who were seated around him, he said, "These are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does God's will is my brother, my sister, and my mother." Hmm. So some of the words used by Jesus seem really strange, and they contrast with his goodness and inalterable benevolence towards everyone. Disbelievers never cease to use this as a weapon, stating that he contradicted himself. The undeniable fact, however, is that his doctrine has as its essential foundation and cornerstone the law of love and charity. And thus, he could not destroy on one hand what he established on the other. And we must therefore draw the unbending conclusion that if some of his maxims are in contradiction with that basic principle, it is because the words attributed to him have been either wrongly conveyed, wrongly understood, or were not his at all. It is it is understandably a cause for wonder that in this circumstance Jesus displays such indifference toward his family and in a certain way denies his own mother. Regarding his brothers, it is said that they never held him in much esteem. Being little advanced spirits, they did not understand his mission. In their opinion, his behavior was bizarre, and his teaching did not touch them, since he did not have one disciple from amongst them. It seems that to a certain extent they might have shared the prejudices of his enemies. The fact of the matter is that they welcomed him more as a stranger than a brother whenever he met with his family. And John states specifically, they did not believe in him. And that was a quote from John 7:5. Now, as for his mother, no one could question her tenderness toward her son. However, one must also agree that she too seemed not to have had a very precise idea about Jesus' mission, and she was never known to follow his teachings or give testimony regarding him, as did John the Baptist. Maternal solicitude was the sentiment that predominated in her. As far as Jesus is concerned, to believe that he denied his mother would be to show ignorance of his character. Such an idea could not have animated the one who said, "Honor your father and mother." Hence, it is necessary to look for another meaning for his words, which were nearly always shrouded in a veil of allegory anyway. Jesus never wasted an opportunity to give a lesson, and therefore he took advantage of his family's arrival to establish the difference between corporal kinship and spirit kinship. Pay attention to that. There is a difference between corporal kinship, the mother and father and brothers and sisters of your physical corporal body, and spirit kinship, the father, mother, brother, and sister of your spirit body. This is how we're going to get into that conversation about soul bodies and spirit family and all that stuff, right? So let us get into the next subcategory, which is corporal kinship and spirit kinship. Blood ties do not necessarily establish ties among spirits. Blood ties do not necessarily establish ties among spirits. The body proceeds from the body, but the spirit does not proceed from the spirit because the spirit already existed before the formation of the body. Parents do not create the spirit of the children. They do not furnish them with their corporal envelope. But it is their duty to aid in their intellectual and moral development to help them progress. Spirits who incarnate in the same family, especially among close relatives, are most often sympathetic spirits connected by previous relationships that are expressed by their mutual affection during earthly life. Nevertheless, it may also happen that such spirits are complete strangers to one another, divided by previous antipathies that are now expressed as animosity to serve as a trial. Therefore, real family ties are not blood ties, but ties of sympathy and similarity of ideas that connect spirits before, during, and after their incarnations. It thus follows that two individuals born from different parents may be more like brothers through their spirit than if they were brothers through blood. They may attract each other, search for each other, feel happy together, whereas two brothers related by blood may repel each other, a fact attested to every day. This moral problem is one that only Spiritism can resolve by means of the plurality of existences. This is a principle within Spiritism. Plurality of existences. Take note of that, please. Consequently, there are two types of families: families through spirit ties and families through corporal ties. The former are permanent, and they are strengthened through purification and are perpetuated in the spirit world through the many migrations of the soul. The latter are fragile, like matter itself, are extinguished over time, and often dissolve morally, even in the current lifetime. This is what Jesus wanted to make understood by saying to his disciples, "Here are my mother and brothers. That is my family through the ties of the Spirit, because all who do the will of my Father who is in heaven are my brother, my sister, and my mother." Now, his brother's hostility is clearly expressed in Mark's narrative, which states that their purpose was to take charge of him under the pretext that he had lost his mind. So, upon being informed of their arrival and knowing their sentiments toward him, it was natural that Jesus, speaking from a spiritual standpoint, would refer to his disciples as, "These are my true brothers." His mother was with his brothers, and thus Jesus generalizes this lesson, which in no way implies that he meant that his mother, according to the body, was not to him according to the spirit, and that he felt nothing but indifference towards her. No, 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 no. His behavior on many other occasions provided quite the contrary. So now we're going to get into the Spirit's teachings. Okay, this means that we're going to listen to some of the quotes from various different spirits that have been channeled on the same subject. Okay, so the Spirit's teachings, they're going to be talking about the children's ingratitude and family ties. And the spirit that is going to be talking is, where is it? Where's the name of the spirit? Damn, he got a lot to say. Saint Augustine in Paris in 1862. So Saint Augustine is going to put his 2 cents in on this. Ingratitude is one of the most immediate fruits of selfishness. It is always revolting to honest hearts. But the ingratitude of children towards their parents has an even more odious character. It is particularly from this point of view that we will look at ingratitude in order to analyze its cause and effects. In this case, as in all others, Spiritism has come to shed light on one of the problems of the human heart. When the spirit leaves the earth behind, it takes with it the passions or virtues inherent to its nature and goes into the spirit world either to perfect itself or to remain at a standstill until it desires to see the light. Some, therefore, depart carrying with them great hatred, insatiable desires for vengeance. But a few of these, more advanced than others, are allowed to glimpse a bit of the truth. They realize the disastrous effects of their passions and then resolve to do better. They understand that in order to reach God, there is one password only: charity. However, there can be no charity without forgetting offenses and wrongs. Neither can there be charity with hatred in the heart and without forgiveness. Next, through an unprecedented effort, these spirits look at those they detested while on earth, but at such a sight, their animosity reawakens. They rebel against the idea of forgiveness and even more against self-denial, especially when it means loving those who perhaps destroyed their fortune, honor, or family. In spite of this, however, the heart of these unfortunate spirits is shaken. They hesitate and waver, troubled by their conflicting sentiments. If the resolution to do better wins, they pray to God and implore the good spirits to give them strength at the most decisive moment of trial. Finally, After years of meditation and prayer, the spirit profits from the use of a body that is to be born in the family of the one it used to hate. And it asks the spirits designated to transmit the divine orders to be allowed to fulfill on the earth the destiny of that body that is about to be formed. So, how will it behave as a member of this family? That will depend on the degree of persistence of its resolution to do better. The constant contact with individuals is used to hate is a terrible trial to which it succumbs, sometimes if its will is not sufficiently strong. Thus, depending on whether its good or bad resolution prevails, it will either be a friend or an enemy of those among whom it has been called upon to live. This is how one can explain those hatreds, those instinctive repulsions that may be observed in certain children, which no previous act seems to justify. In fact, there is nothing in the present existence that could have caused such antipathy. In order to understand it, one must look to the past. Oh, spiritists, you must understand humankind's grand role. You must understand that when you produce a body, the soul who incarnates in it has come from the spirit world in order to progress. Know your duties and put all your love in leading that soul to God. This is the mission, and that has been entrusted to you, for which you will receive recompense if you faithfully fulfill it. The care and education you give it will help in its self improvement and future well being. Remember that God will ask every father and every mother, "What did you do for your children whom I entrusted into your care?" And if because of your fault they have remained behind, your punishment will be to see them among the suffering spirits, when it depended on you for them to be happy. Hence, you yourselves, tormented by remorse, will ask to repair your wrong. You will ask yourselves and for them another incarnation in which you will surround them with more enlightened care and full of gratitude. They will surround you with their love. Therefore, do not rebuff the little children who spurns its mother, or those who repay you with ingratitude. It was no accident that made it that way and gave it to you. An imperfect intuition about the past is being revealed, from which you may deduce that one or the other has hated much or has been greatly offended, and that one or the other has come to forgive or to expiate. Mothers, embrace, therefore, the child who causes you trouble, and say to yourself, "One of us was blameworthy." Make yourself deserve the divine joys that God has bestowed upon motherhood by teaching your children that they are on the earth to improve themselves, to love, and to bless. But alas, many of you, instead of using education to drive away the innate bad tendencies brought over from previous lifetimes, you maintain and increase them because of your blameworthy weakness or because of negligence. And later on, your heart, ulcerated by the ingratitude of your children, will be for you, starting in this life, the beginning of your expiation. The task is not as difficult as you might think, however. It does not require the wisdom of the world. The uneducated, as well as the learned, can fulfill it, and Spiritism has come to facilitate it by making known the cause of the imperfections of the human heart. From infancy, children manifest the good or the bad instincts that they have brought from their previous existences, and it is necessary that we apply ourselves to studying them. All evils have their origin in selfishness and pride. So watch out for those least signs that reveal the seeds of these vices and take care to combat them without waiting for them to put down deeper roots. Be like good gardeners who cut off the defective roots as soon as they appear on the tree. If selfishness and pride are allowed to develop, do not be surprised if you are paid back later with ingratitude. When parents have done everything that they should for their children's moral advancement, but are unsuccessful nonetheless, they have nothing to reproach themselves for, and their conscience can rest easy. But as for the very natural heartache they feel from the failure of their efforts, God reserves a great and immense consolation through the certainty that it is only a delay and that it will be given to them to achieve in another existence the work they began in this one, and that someday their ungrateful children will repay them with their love. God never imposes trials beyond the strength of those who ask for them. He only allows trials that can be completed successfully. Can I just pause there for one moment? Because I know all of y'all have had an elder in your life, whether it be a parent or a mentor or a teacher or a friend of a family, who had said to you during a very hard time, God will never give you anything you can't handle, right? I think we've all kind of heard that before and never really kind of understood where that came from, because many of us grew up in a very monotheistic religion that did not believe in reincarnation. And so therefore trials were seen as, the consequences of the sins of Eve and the consequences of the sins of the flesh, etc., etc. But here Spiritism is saying, that these trials were trials that you yourself requested for your own development, or that the spirit that also engaged in that issue with you, or they requested it. Either way, your souls are going to be destined to meet again at some point, because y'all have unfinished business. You have unfinished business because at some point your interaction, your convergence of soul timelines made it so that you had no choice but to play a part in each other's growth and evolution. And so if during one of those lifetimes you interacted and you did not fulfill that role of evolving each other, then rest assured you are going to converge again at some later point. And so this is the rationale behind this information that a lot of us who grew up in these religions that didn't believe in reincarnation, we just didn't understand. You know what I mean? We just didn't get it. But someone understood it. Someone was like, don't worry, baby, you're going to get through this. This too shall pass. God doesn't give you things you can't handle. Right? Let's keep going. Let me see. Regarding those who do not succeed, it is not because they lack the ability, but because they lack the will. For there are many who, instead of resisting their bad tendencies, take pleasure in them. It is for these that tears and cries of anguish are reserved in later existences. Therefore, admire the goodness of God, who never shuts the door to repentance. A day will come in which the wrongdoers tire of suffering, where their pride is finally controlled, and that is when God opens his paternal arms to the prodigal son who throws himself at his feet. Harsh trials, hear me well, almost always indicate an end of suffering and of an improvement for the spirit when they are accepted out of love for God. It is a supreme moment during which it is especially important not to fail by complaining if one does not want to lose the fruits of such trial and have to start all over again. Instead of complaining, thank God for offering you the opportunity to triumph in order to reward you with the prize of victory. Then, when you leave the whirlwind of the terrestrial world and enter into the spirit world, you will be acclaimed like a soldier who has departed from from the midst of combat. Of all trials, the hardest are those that affect the heart. Some courageously bear misery and material privations, but yield to the weight of domestic bitterness, bruised by the ingratitude of their loved ones. What a pungent heartbreak that is. However, in such circumstances, what can better display moral courage than an understanding of the causes of evil and the certainty that even if there are long afflictions, despair does not last forever. For God cannot want one of his creatures to suffer eternally. What can be more consoling, more encouraging than the thought that it depends on your own efforts to shorten your own suffering by destroying the causes of evil within yourselves? To do so, however, you cannot keep your gaze on the earth and see only one existence. Lift yourselves up and hover in the infinity of the past and of the future. Then God's great justice will be revealed to you, and you will wait patiently because you understand what seemed like monstrosities while on the earth, and the wounds you received there will seem like nothing more than scratches. In that glance cast over the whole, family ties will appear in their true light. They will no longer They are no longer the fragile ties of matter connecting family members, but the lasting ties of the spirit, which continue and consolidate as they purify themselves instead of being broken through reincarnation. Spirits who have similarities in tastes, in moral progress, and affection form families. During their earthly migrations, these same spirits seek one another out in order to group together, as they did in the spirit world. And from this, united and homogeneous families are born. And if, during their pilgrimages, they are temporarily separated, they will find one another later, happy for the rest, for their latest progress. But since they must not work only for themselves, God allows less advanced spirits to incarnate among them in order to receive counsel and good examples in the interests of their own advancement. These spirits sometimes cause trouble, but that is what comprises the trial. That is where the task lies. Therefore, welcome them as brothers and sisters. Come to their aid, and later in the world of spirits, the family will be happy for having saved castaways, who, in turn, will be able to save others. So that is the end of chapter 4. Here's where I kind of want to take a pause, right? Because we get to that point in the reincarnation conversation where people ask, okay, well, if you're saying that we chose these trials, we chose to be reincarnated and to interact with each other, to have these moments that are difficult, um, what do you say about people who are born into poor, countries, or children who are being, molested and raped and SA'd by their own family members or friends, or people who take pleasure and sadistic joy in harming animals and the elderly and disabled? What do you say about the disabled? So all of these questions start coming up about this idea of suffering, right? This idea of coming into a world that you didn't ask to come into, supposedly, and dealing with just a numerous amount of suffering, right? And what would be said from the perspective of spiritism, and we're going to get into this in later chapters because they're going to talk about charity, they're going to talk about salvation, they're going to talk about suffering in the more larger societal context. All right, because if you try and speak on it in individual contexts, it doesn't seem to make much sense when you're thinking about those really big cases. But when you look at it from bigger societal contexts, it makes a lot of sense, right? Because we learned about this in the very first book, the Spirits book, where we talk about how we ourselves, spiritists, mediums, who are on the path of progress and growth, we're not the only ones on that path. Because we are relationship kind of people, we're social people, our progression will ultimately affect the society as a whole. So basically, what I'm saying is if the society is not progressively growing and evolving spiritually, then the laws and the societal structures that are then in place are also going to be flawed and fucked up and not progressive and not evolved. And then those laws then affect other countries and other places, and we start to see the domino effect of very ill prepared spirits. Okay? And in the same way that can happen, the opposite can happen. If you have a society of progressed individuals, people who look out for each other, people who understand the laws of reincarnation and their purpose of charity, love, light, and divine justice, then that too will then leak out to the rest of the world, and we will start making laws and start making societal structures that will reflect that. So when people ask me, Leilani, what about these starving children over here? And what about these children that are being kidnapped over here? And what about, you're right. To say that they asked for that prior to being born is ridiculous. I'm pretty sure that that's not what they asked for. However, when they came into this world, the structures that were in place are the result of less evolved spirits, and they become a product. They deal with the consequences of those horrible and disgusting structures. So it's not an individual's problem anymore. It becomes a larger problem. And because of that, and if you can add that to this particular chapter that we just read, right? He talks about how if you don't take care of your parents, if you don't love your neighbor when you see them suffering, or when they engage in bad behavior, then you yourself are just to blame. You're just as much to blame in the progression, in not helping them evolve. So while they're fucking up and staying stagnant, you too are fucking up and staying stagnant by not interacting with that in a positive way, because that is your purpose as a spiritist. And it's the same thing on a larger scale. When you are seeing people suffering, when you are seeing children being kidnapped, when you are seeing people getting SA'd, and you are not doing anything about that, you are just as guilty as the people who created the structure in the first fucking place. Y pa carajo, right? That's it. What time is it right now? Perfect. So we have 15 minutes left. Beautiful. So I'm going to end that chapter. That was chapter 14. We are now going to go to chapter 15 in the next video, but now the floor is open to any of your questions, any of your comments. This is a good opportunity to clear up some things, or if you have questions from the previous books that we read, by all means, now is the time. Hello, hello. Oh my God, I see all these wonderful people here. Mateo, thank you so much. Yes, of course. What do you got? What kind of questions you got here? I rolled this a little too tight. Shit. Can't suck it. Bad. It's a bad situation. Let's see what we got here. Not real fire. Not real fire. Aw, thank you. I love you too, Rob. Hi, operator. Thank you for stopping by. Lavetta, Zelma. So we have a we have a comment here on TikTok, actually. So thank you to Facebook and YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and all you guys for watching. So this question or this comment from TikTok is saying, I have a twin flame connection, and I feel like they have just taken over. Like my life is just consumed by this, and and yet they don't even talk to them in the physical. Oh yeah. So things like that do happen, when we have soul ties with people, when we create connections with people, whether they be in this physical world now or in any other previous lifetime or even in any other future lifetime, because again, we're talking about time, which is literally all happening now. So we can't really say past present. When we talk about reincarnation, we're literally saying recycling. We're just saying recycling because it's all happening at the same time, right? So, situations like that do happen where for a fact that you have soul ties all over this world. Some of them you may have met, some of them you haven't met. Either way, you are connected. And sometimes, depending on the relationship, depending on a lot of things, that connection can be very toxic or very helpful. They can be consuming. They can take up your dreams. They can take up your thoughts throughout the day. They can affect, your pattern, your eating pattern, sleeping pattern, your exercise pattern, your ability to take in information and communicate information, et cetera, et cetera. So to know that that has that much of an effect on you, it's very important to nourish these relationships in a very healthy way and to interact with these relationships in a very healthy way. And when you have soul ties that are toxic, here's my thing. Here's where it gets complicated. Okay? I get the argument of, okay, well, I have a soul flame or twin flame. They are toxic as fuck. And I don't believe that it is my responsibility to deal with that bullshit. So therefore, I'm putting up boundaries and I'm cutting ties. And you know what, baby? All the more to you. All the more to you. Listen, ain't nobody pressuring you to do nothing. You don't have to forgive nobody. You don't have to accept nobody in your life. You're not here to fix nobody. You know what I mean? So if you are suffering because somebody got a hold on you like that, you have every right to protect your boundaries and cut those ties. No doubt. However, here's the big however. And Alan Kardec loves to write using the word however a lot. If you take up the title of spiritist, spiritualist, and especially that title from the tradition of Allan Kardec and from that period on, then you've said with claiming that title that you will do that work, that you will work on forgiving, that you will work on being gentle, that you will work on charity, that you will work on loving your neighbor and all that shit, right? And that is hard. And that is the trial. And that is why we have to be back here all the time. So long story short is you don't have to do shit. You don't got to forgive nobody and you don't have to help nobody. That is completely up to you. But you will eventually, according to this tradition. So either you do it now or you do it at some other point. But you're going to do it because you can't escape it, because that was your path. Right? So, but again, because I don't want nobody to come for me, everything is about your belief, your perspective, your traditions, right? I'm not going to sit here and tell anybody what to do. I am simply reporting what is being said and how those viewpoints stand within these traditions, right? Can you cut ties with a twin flame? Okay, so it's a great question. I'm going to be 1000% honest with you. Although I claim to be a spiritualist, I do not believe in twin flames. I know what we just read here. I understand that it's in the doctrine. And the word twin flame is not in the doctrine. Let me make that clear. The word twin flame is not in the doctrine. But this idea of having spirit ties with people and having spiritual families because of particular interests, and we'll get into that in a second. That is real. But notice how it is written. Spirits that seek each other out due to common interests, moral similarities, and intellectual, similarities tend to form spirit families. However, and this is the part that they didn't say in the book, but this is later talked about, the similarities, the moral similarities, the intellectual similarities, the interests, those can change every lifetime. And people's evolution and people's progress happen at different paces. So what would have been your soul family in the last lifetime isn't necessarily not everyone in that group is going to make it to the next round of soul family. Because in your next incarnation, you are going to progress. You're going to learn more. You're going to have different trials. Stuff is going to happen. And that moral code that you had before is going to change. And that intellectual, thing you had before is going to change. And that's a good thing, you guys. That's such a good thing. So when you tell me, can you cut ties with a twin flame? Yes. Can you make more spirit bonds with people? Yes. Yes. To all of it. Okay? So, oh, my Tina, my beautiful goddess. I love you, Tina. Thank you so much for the flowers. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So that's a great question. And the answer is yes, you can. Yes, you can. Not real fire. TikTok, not real fire. Not real fire. Any other questions? Mm. Okay. Well, with that said, those of you who are on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram right now, please go over to TikTok, because I think I'm going to continue this conversation about why I've been gone for a little bit. And if you don't want to miss that, head over to TikTok. You know what? Maybe I will start a new YouTube thing. Yeah, maybe that's what I'll do. Anyway, I don't see any more questions. So I want everyone to have a beautiful, beautiful night. Make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe. Leave reviews. If you can leave reviews, that would be helpful. I don't really ask for too much. I don't send a lot of advertisements out. I try not to bother. But, however you can show your support would be super helpful, because this is the only way that I know right now to connect with people, to just share information, and that's really all I want to do. Like, I'm not trying to, be the next prophet or whatever, but I do feel like when you have something beautiful, when you have something good, give it away. Give it to people. Allow people to experience that too. You know what I mean? People are so quick and so ready to just trauma dump on everyone else. Why aren't we quick and ready to share good stuff? Trust me, we need to hear it. All of us need to hear it. All of us do. Anyway, this is how we grow, guys. Have a good night.